Hello. Um, I would just record something here. Just something that has been on my mind a bit. Honestly, this has been kind of like the, had stuff on the mind lately with the, everyone kind of having a discussion about, like, the different stages in the game. Everything. Just something that I thought I would kind of record. Maybe, like, to just kind of talk about. I guess more like objectively the stage design, not necessarily talking about, oh, it's a corridor, oh, it's a choke point. Just kind of like something to talk about what the, I guess, what you would consider the stage as it is and how you would, like, play it, I guess. I don't know. I just thought I would do something just like, I don't know, get my thoughts out there, I guess. I don't know. It's a whole thing. Probably won't cover everything. There are 23 stages in this game. It is insane how many there are. But I thought I would first start with Scorch Gorge. You know, kind of get a feel for how I guess, like, the stage is designed. Like, why is there platforms here and everything? Why is that? You know, because you can't get onto this. But why is this here? You know. So anyway, let's get started. So, Scorch Gorge, as can be noted by the location, right, takes place in this, like, very remote. It's very, like, I remember correctly, the lore canonically is that this is just an outpost that was turned into a stage in the middle of, like, a national park or something, where these, like, weird rocks form. So it kind of has this, like, whole rustic feel and aesthetic and everything. You know, you can see the old spawn point, which is a pretty neat detail. But as for how the stage is designed, almost immediately, you notice that you have a little bit of room, right? However, in comparison to some of the spawns that exist in 2 and from the maps from 2, and some of the maps from 1 has its own host of small spawns, but this actual, like, relative safe ground is kind of small. Basically, it's mostly just meant to be here in the event that you are getting, like, extremely backed up and you just need to use this to do something. I would not necessarily consider this I would consider this, like, it's like your extreme spawn. Like, if you're in an extreme situation where people are, like, up to there, then this would probably be, like, I would consider this your spawn. Other than that, you're most likely going to be using these areas more often. There just kind of is a ramp there to get back up. However, you also additionally have, and I have yet to really see people use this, I guess because this doesn't really ever come into mind ever. Because most of the time, if you're, like, getting backed up, people are, like, going over there. However, you have this, like, pretty good, high ground that it may be small, but, like, you can reach a decent bit out with it. Obviously, I'm using Nova, so I have a bit more range anyway. But, you know, I think generally a splatling, your charger, bow, any, like, sort of long range weapon, pencil, probably can, like, use this pretty effectively, in my opinion. But I haven't seen people use this too much. And it kind of has definitely made me question why. Because this, in theory, is pretty good high ground. I guess it might be the fact that it's just uninkable and it's just incredibly small. It only really does give you good view over this. and even then, you'd have to be in like a decently long-range weapon. Like, Nova can only just barely reach out to there, and that's it. But anyway. I guess, moving on then. This, again, I would consider this the area that you're most likely going to be using as your actual spawn. Is this area right here. Mostly, you're going to be using this, basically this defending block. Now, obviously, this is turf war. For most of the maps that this is played on, this is not there. So, ignore this completely. We are going to actually be talking about competitive. As we can kind of see here, you have this, but you basically have some small little outcrops that you can use to basically defend with. I guess let's start over here actually. You have this very interesting piece of terrain that I haven't really seen elsewhere. I kind of recognize this stage for having this almost in your spawn, where you have this small outcropping, but then you have this far right platform that juts down and out, as well as this like piece of cover. I know a charger is able to peek there if you need to. If you're like backed up extremely far and someone has just like dropped onto there, you can apply pressure and move them up out of there, which kind of allows you a little bit more room. I can probably talk about it a bit later. But you have this like cover right here that you can use, which essentially forces people to like come out of here in order to actually face you down. So, I think it's very interesting from a design standpoint. I guess kind of the reason why I'm even talking about these stages in the first place is that I find this kind of stuff very interesting. It's the small details, in my opinion. Because you have this ground that's basically on the same level, and normally the way that this gets played is that you back up your opponents that have like gotten into this area, right? And then you just kind of like drop down. However, you additionally have other ways of actually like facing down your opponents, I guess, with this doing different ways of being able to actually tackle this situation. One of these, again, is by baiting them to come down into here by using this cover right here. Because you have this cover, which means that they basically can only reach you from this area. So they have to be able to actually go down and face you down. Which actually puts them at a little bit of risk. So something you can also do is that if you bait them, you can also prematurely go up onto here, which gives you even more extreme high ground, right? Even more cover here. Additionally, this cover also provides you not only just cover, but an even higher place to stand and safely like recover ink. However, note that this platform does not go out as far. Notably, I have seen a lot of long-range chargers and snipers be able to get out of here because you can safely peek this area, which is usually this area is mostly used by whenever I've been playing this stage and watching tournaments and everything. I usually tend to see a short-range shooter, maybe an ink brush, a weapon that basically works through shark in this position, basically because it is very predictable to get up onto here. And even I have used that platform to shark, which is very helpful if you are wanting to maintain this area, right? But you notably have not only this to contest, but you also have this even higher ground to contest, which interestingly has more value as you have baited someone to get into here, which I find interesting. note that this block is only inkable on these two sides. I still don't exactly know why, considering the entirety of this ground is uninkable. So I don't necessarily see any problem that originates from making that inkable, but then again, I don't know. It's very interesting. Then you have this thing. This thing, I don't know too much about it. I haven't really seen this used. What I can glean from it, though, right? Based on the fact that it is another low ground thing, it is something that seems to be more providing high ground advantage over this area, specifically. So essentially, it's kind of used in a situation where where your opponents have managed to get back up, have managed to get into this area, and you are having to take this ground. This probably provides a lot more value for a short-range shooter. Like, so you kind of have this dichotomy, right? This works better for long-range shooters to apply pressure over here, as well as to bait people over from there, for not only short-range shooters, but long-range shooters. Then you have this area, which is pretty good for long-range weapons, for being able to poke over to there, as well as being able to safely poke down here. And then you have this ground, which works really well for short-range shooters, but not necessarily for, like, long-range weapons, simply because it's so exposed, right? This is extremely exposed, with, like, basically no cover, which is, again, very interesting. Anyway, moving on to the left here, we have this little bit of ground, as well as this cover. I have struggled a little bit to understand this cover. Why is it here? What does it do? But I think the more time that I give thought to things about this game, the more time I kind of realize this is definitely supposed to be one of those safe provide cover in case someone is sharking here. It essentially, what it does, I believe, is that it forces someone to go up further in order to actually shark, as well as providing more cover for anyone coming out of spawn. So if you're coming out of spawn here, you have this cover that safely keeps you safe from people that are just sharking underneath here. While this provides sharking opportunities, it is very awkward to actually hit, because you have to basically take a very low ground if you want to take it, unless you want to like hit extreme angles up here, considering that your weapon, you are very close to the wall. So you have to, essentially, if you want to safely shark or like get people, you essentially have to take this. However, this cover kind of prevents you from getting people immediately. What this also kind of does, though, is it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It also gives you cover to back up to in the event that someone is, say, right here, and they were shooting at you, right? They have to, like, now move out into here if they want to actually take you on. So you basically have safe cover that you can bait people with in the event that you get backed up again. Very fascinating. Anyway, there's not much to glean from this long walk to actually get to anywhere. However, these specific blocks also, again, have different, they have kind of a little bit more of a risk-reward type thing, which is kind of like something that was over there. Everything has its own reasons for being there. It has a theoretical point as to why it's there. Obviously, I think most of this talk is theoretics, because I am not the greatest at stage design or the greatest at analysis at all. I just wanted to give my own 2 cents on everything. So starting off, we have this long jut out block. This mostly provides you a good way of just getting opponents in this area. You also have peeking opportunities. Notably, this cover is here, which means that if you would like to get someone over there, you have to either jump up or take them on from the left, which interestingly can't be used by chargers to peek unless you're trying to peek like this small. Like, you basically have to get up right here if you want to peek, which is very interesting that you have to get up like on the edge of the platform if you want to actually peek. Then you have this block right here. This block is a block that exists. I don't know why it's so small, but I do know that it does provide you with very good high ground on this side in order to fight people on this area, but also again fight people on this area. However, it's on a grate, so it kind of has this whole like risk and reward thing. You basically get you have the highest ground that you're ever going to be able to get on defending this. However, you have to use a grate here, or you have to use this block. Notably, again, take note, these blocks are on the very edge, this block is on the very edge. This forces chargers to have to peek over from here, which I find fascinating because it basically says, okay, so if you want to peek, you have to risk. You have to do some kind of risk if you want to peek. And we are going to see this a lot more, a whole lot more as we talk more about the stage, is that they notably have very few times where the block is on the left of the platform, basically allowing you to peek from a more middle of the ground or inward situation. In fact, the only example is this ground over here, which essentially says that if you want to use this peeking spot, right, you have to use this side. However, if you want to get that high ground, you're going to have to do risky peeks if you want to actually get anyone well behind cover. Anyway, after all of this talk about the spawn, and also this small thing that prevents you from falling off by swimming, very handy, we can finally talk about this area. We can finally talk about the area outside of spawn. Yeah, we're gonna be this is gonna be long. So notably, you have all of this high ground. However, you have to go into low ground, which in this kind of like fairly open-ish area, you have to go into low ground before going back up into high ground. It kind of creates this like dip, almost, where it kind of forces opponents to have to take low ground if they want to keep pushing. However, you can always back up in the high ground, but your opponents can also back up in the high ground, which kind of creates this back and forth. I'm not gonna say my 2 cents on it here, but I just will note that it does create this kind of back and forth. Additionally, you don't have a lot of cover, right? So you have this like small nub that you can use that kind of like gives you a little bit of similar room over the area. However, notably, you have this pole that you can kind of use as cover almost in some way. You can definitely use this as cover if you need to like take a fight, or kind of what it does, I guess, is it just forces people to come down and actually take a fight on you, because now you have this cover that you can keep using in addition to just being able to back up infinitely into your own high ground. However, again, notably, you have this bumper. Now, this bumper is interesting because what it can do, right, is it can create a way of you being able to poke out while forcing your opponents to have to drop in order to actually get you from here. This is actually in kind of stark contrast to how it can be used by attackers. Because if you're attacking, you can also use this to bait people into dropping. However, they don't have to. However, defenders don't actually, as if they have a long range weapon, they can actually just take that on from here. However, what this does do, right? This is very interesting game design thing. While long range weapons have good angles on this, shorter range weapons either have to drop or they have to switch the side that they are using if they want to safely take you out. Essentially, it adds another kind of question. Do you want to have a safe time that takes longer, or do you want to have a more immediate ability to take out someone hiding here that takes risks? Now, obviously, you can kind of also split your team up. Have someone go on the right side, and then have multiple people kind of taking left. But I don't know. It's fascinating to me because it does mean that if you have someone that's over here that you want gone, then if you have like a shorter range weapon that you want gone, then you can kind of force them to drop or go all the way around here. Which if they do go around all the way over here, that can give you an opportunity to kind of shark in almost. Anyway, we have this ramp. This is a ramp. We can use it as a ramp. Anyway. This is a ramp. We can use it as a ramp. Anyway. Yeah, essentially, again, this ramp kind of does a very similar thing of this ramp. It essentially gives defenders or attackers a way of backing up to continue defending. However, notably, the ramp here does not continue on, and instead you have this. You have this wall. I believe that this wall is here because of how crucial this area is. Think about it, right? If you get to here, no matter what, a shorter range weapon has to drop if they want to fight you. This is the furthest point away from both sides of the spawn, right? That still allows you to maintain this top area. So I think what this interestingly does is that this wall being here forces you to have to take a risky wall climb rather than having a safe ramp in order to make it so that you can't easily back up onto this area. Obviously, you know, a wall isn't necessarily, this isn't the worst wall of all time, but yeah, I just find it fascinating that this wall essentially asks you a question, right? If you want to maintain this pretty important area that is farthest away from both of the spawns, and you have to drop from it, if you want to get back there, you have to take a wall. And you can't just use a ramp to just kind of back up onto here. Anyway, so now again we have a left side and a right side to talk about. We have this area. So I talked about this area from the... Sorry about that. Something ended up cropping up. So anyway, we were talking about this area. I already talked about this area from the point of view of an attacker, right? You have gotten to this area, and you want to maintain it. So if you want to keep maintaining this, right? If you have to take a drop, you're not going to be able to safely get back from it, because a wall is very, very punishable. Not only from the perspective, like you can do so much damage with a wall. Not only is it basically forcing you to have to remain in the same area in order to get anywhere further. You can also just throw a burst bomb. Someone could drop down and get you from the wall. However, again, it's there for a reason. It's there to so that this ground, as I mentioned before, which is furthest from all spawn points, doesn't be easily able to be backed up into. Anyway, so now, so let's back up a bit. You know, it's the beginning of the game. You have managed to drop down out of these areas, and now you are about to go into mid. Right, now let's say that you are in a currently losing situation. Right, you've been backed up onto this whole area while your opponents have mid. How does this impact you? Well, let's take a look. So now let's take a look at this from the perspective of you are a defender and now you are basically trying to attack mid from this area. You have a couple of options. Obviously, you have some cover here, which again provides chargers a way of peeking. However, notably again, the peeking forces you to be on the edge of the platform and doesn't provide you too much room. Right. This is the only real safe peeking place on here, but even then, right, there's a... We'll get to this area in a bit, but again, notably you have this cover which you can use to force people out of here. I think notably something that I find interesting, right, is that you can use this cover to force people to get out of here, because you have extreme high ground advantage over this. Obviously, people can probably poke you with a bomb and throw a bomb here. However, notably, you basically have as much room as you'd want to ever back up to a bomb, so it's fine. However, again, notably, interesting here. We'll get to this platform in a bit, but essentially this block here can be used as a sharking opportunity from behind it, where like a short range weapon or something kind of with medium-ish range can use this block as a way of cover. However, if they actually, you have this cover, which you can use to kind of like poke them a little bit. So if they want to safely get to you, they have to basically like get to this area. However, interesting, we have this kind of jump, which allows you to have equal room if you're a long range, if you're a mid-range weapon, almost near equal room to the top mid platform, while also giving you just extreme height advantage over this entire area. However, you have to not only take a step in order to get onto it, but it's also uninkable. So it kind of just allows you to have this high ground advantage at the cost of basically being on uninkable terrain. Then you have this block. This block is kind of just here for more cover-ish. It kind of accomplishes the same thing as this, where this one's just kind of cover on both sides for multiple reasons. This one kind of just is there for cover and also some slight peeking opportunities. We'll talk about drops in a bit. Actually, I don't want to talk about drops right now. I want to re-temp here. Anyway, so then you have this sniping block. I would argue that this is kind of the big, this is the, one of the map's most defining gimmicks, is the fact that it has a sniping block that allows you to hit any area that isn't like directly behind this. You basically get all of your half of the map to snipe from, aside from, we'll get to this terrain later. This is also the highest, nearly the highest point on the map. This block is higher, but this is essentially the highest point on the map, aside from the very small blocks that are a little bit higher. However, notably, you also have this pole in the way, so not only can you use this for peeking, right? However, you can also use it to have cover, essentially. But notably, what it also does is that it's kind of useful for both long range and short range weapons, right? I think this is something that I need to start taking advantage of a bit more, the more that I kind of think about this. But this essentially just gives you free range over the grate here, which is the opponent's only way of getting in on Turf War. So essentially on Turf War in both Splat zones, where this grate is the way that it is on these modes, I find it very interesting that this block is both useful for long-range weapons and short-range weapons. Interestingly, at different times. For short-range weapons, this is mostly just useful if someone's coming up here. But if someone's coming up here, then they can just easily use the grate to also just poke here, right? However, for a long-range weapon, if there's nothing going on and you just need to take mid and your opponents aren't trying to force their way in, then you can use this as a sniping perch. However, for short-range weapons, you have these areas that provide you with better damage output because you're not having to deal with extreme fall-off. Just something interesting. Additionally, another thing of note, this can only be accessed from this side, which essentially forces you, if you want to actually take advantage of this, to have to go up onto here. However, it's honestly not too bad. You can just kind of like do this and just... You can, if you get good at movement, you can just kind of do stuff like this and then just immediately get on. If you want to take this area very quickly, some people are trying to get up here. Anyway, so then you have this area. This is kind of just wide-ish to help give a little bit more room for fights. It's not... I don't think this is... It's definitely very small for fighting, I would say. It definitely kind of makes you have to, like, question, do you back up here to get a little bit more room, or do you back up to get more room? Or do you keep pushing forward despite having very little room? Especially if you are an attacker and you have been backed up on the here, you have a single way to go unless you want to reset your entire progress. But probably should also talk about this. So this is something that Splatoon 3 and kind of late Splatoon 2 started doing, where they started making certain good sharking spots be punished by having uninkable terrain. Essentially what this does is it means that you can't recover ink quickly on this area, and if you actually want to take a fight, you are extremely vulnerable because you can't maneuver as well. You're basically going at walking speed anytime you try and maneuver on here. Which is very interesting. These notably mostly crop up around your spawn. They usually don't happen in mid. However, this is kind of just a thing that 2 and 3 started doing, and some of 1 stages have it. I know Bluefin has a very big example of this, but we'll talk about Bluefin later. Anyway, then you have this cover. So this cover is another one of those important covers that is on the other side, where you basically get enough room, where you basically aren't being forced to get onto the edge in order to poke. Essentially what this kind of does is that it provides, so this is kind of a two-way thing. Firstly, it provides you a little bit of safe room in order to drop onto here. However, it also allows chargers to peek this like court place pretty easily, while still remaining safe, because the only way that this can ever be contested is for an opponent to get into here, and even then they're probably going to be throwing a bomb if they have one, or inkjet. I don't know if this is a situation to use an inkjet though. I don't know. Anyway, so after hopping up onto this block, which kind of just exists to provide some slight high ground and also to equalize the bridge, you have to hop up onto here, and then you have this bridge. I will probably talk more about this bridge in a bit, because it's finally time to talk about your drops into mid. This is an important thing, and this is notably something that people have kind of been complaining about with 3, is that you just don't have good drops into mid, I guess, sometimes. Or at least that's what people usually keep saying about the maps. You know, Barnacle and Dime provides you really few options to approach mid from, you know, all these maps, and I'm not here to discuss whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. However, what I will note, though, is that very interestingly, you have some neat ideas, though, for drops that kind of remind me a bit of the Reef. In fact, the stage as a whole kind of reminds me of some odd hybrid of Urchin Underpass and the Reef, which is interesting. So obviously you have this drop in here, which is held slightly protected by this piece of cover. This drops you, however, into some low ground. However, it does provide you with a way to get a slightly different angle by taking a long path, or by using that platform. I'll talk a little bit more about this. And then obviously you have this big drop, which is probably the most prominent one aside from this. This just kind of gets you into this court area from here. It's definitely a lot more open and a lot more spacious. However, it is definitely way more open in comparison to the other drops. However, your opponents are also extremely vulnerable while staying here with the lack of cover aside from this singular block. Then obviously you could drop from here. You could do that. However, this is another notable drop. This just kind of gets you a slightly different angle of approach. It still drops you into this area, essentially forcing you to, if you want to get any kind of off angle, you have to take a longer path rather than the most immediate and more open option. However, then you have this drop. Obviously, you can drop from here to get into this area and having a slightly different angle, or you could drop from here to get onto this area. However, you also have the ability to make this jump from this area. Note, it has cover again. So if you take the time to get back into here, you essentially have free cover, almost. Obviously, someone standing here could obviously take it on. However, they can't just immediately get you before you take the drop. You have to be actually dropping in order to actually be gotten by an opponent. So anyway, let's talk about mid. I'll talk about these areas in a bit and why they're important, because very similar. These are essentially how you're mostly going to get some amount of edge on the opponent, or any kind of edge over the opponent. So let's say we have dropped onto here. So now we are in this open terrain. We only have really this block to use as cover. However, we can also use this as slight high ground over someone, use it to kind of like get a little bit of a slightly good angle off of here, especially with the camera. I think another important thing about this map, especially here, is using the camera to kind of see ahead. Because of how long these corridors are, it is very easy to kind of just poke your camera here while kind of remaining in a safe area, and you can get a really decent angle on people. You can really get some good angles in order to view the camera from. So yeah, the actual middle of the map kind of just keeps going in a circle. You don't have many options to actually get up into there, with the grate being your only option to continue going forward. Which is, again, fairly, I think it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. A lot of the maps in 3, at least for Turf War, have done this. However, most maps in the series also kind of do this thing where they just kind of give you a singular way to actually force your way into the opponent's side of the map. Which is interesting. I'll talk about this in a bit. However, we do have this block right here. What this block can essentially do, right, is it essentially gives you height over this area, and it gives you even like height over here. You are very vulnerable though. You can basically be shot at any point in time because your only form of cover is this, and even then, someone can just decide, you know what, I don't want to deal with that, I'm going to swim all the way around and shoot you from here. Or they can decide, you know what, wall, I'm going to get you from right here. They can just decide to do that. So you have this very like good advantage block that kind of gives you some very good room to hit this area from a equal height, hit here from high ground. However, it is extremely vulnerable. Again, applying into more of that risk and reward thing that I keep talking about. And it is notable that it's inkable from all sides. So an opponent can also just decide to use this block from over here. It's the exact same amount of vulnerability. However, now, you know, this is kind of usable by everyone. This isn't something that requires the opponent. This isn't something that requires you to actually, like, this isn't something that defenders have easy access to and attackers don't. However, I will note that at least from a attacker standpoint, right, if you are an attacker trying to take this block, you only really get good room over the court. You don't really get good room over this defensive platform. If you're an attacker from this side, essentially forcing you now to have to take this block in order to even get any amount of room. However, notably, if you actually ever want to contest this as an attacker, you have to either take this like low ground and use this piece of cover, or you have to take the grate and get high ground advantage, but you are extremely vulnerable. Anyway, I guess also talking about the grate, let's talk about the grate. So this grate goes across the entirety of mid and essentially acts as your one-way ticket to get to the other side of the map. This is your only approach option on most modes for the game. On most of the painting modes, for like more of the ranked modes, it kind of isn't. Note, I guess, the interesting shape, right? Obviously, they could have just made... obviously, it kind of has this, like, odd line here in order to actually connect over to here. However, I think it is interesting to note that this grate extends slightly over here and extends over here. It doesn't just reach here and then end. It kind of extends outward, which is interesting because it kind of... it gives you an option to like poke slightly forward to attack over here without needing to use this block. And again, this kind of just gives you an option to poke slightly forward here. You know, it's not just use it, everything. However, also, again, not only does this act as your only way to get to here, it also is extremely punishable, but taking it gives you basically immediate access to the top without having to climb a wall. Which is, again, very interesting in my opinion. Another notable thing is that it basically just gives you extreme high ground over any point in the map, which is pretty cool, I think. It's a very punishable area, but it's an area that is definitely worth that punishment. Like, if you get punished here, you know for a fact that you made some kind of mistake. If you're getting punished here, you know that you made a mistake, considering how much of an advantage you have over this. Because you can basically shoot. You can shoot so much the only area that is not able to be like safely shot at from here is like this small area, and even then you basically just get access to the top and then you can just shoot down from here. So that's interesting. Again, also additionally, you have these blocks. These are just kind of here as cover. They can be used as sniper peaks, but they don't do too much. Like, you can use them as sniper peaks, but they are very small and they don't really provide you enough room. So they give you a way of peeking without being too powerful, right? Obviously, having a long-range weapon set up here is extremely good, but this is kind of why they don't have like some kind of pole in the middle on this stage. You know, they didn't add a pole on the middle on this stage because it would just be too much, you know. Now you would just have extreme middle sniping peek and would basically be able to peek anywhere from here at any point in time if you wanted to. I guess the only other thing to talk about is this cover. This cover kind of does the exact same thing as that cover all the way over there, as that bumper. Interesting to note, this used to be a bumper before it got changed in one of the updates. It wasn't the massive, like, what people refer to as the pole update, right? This just kind of got changed randomly, which is interesting. I personally always like it when, you know, like a piece of like ranked blocks, like kind of like these pieces of blocks get turned into more unique terrain. It's something I wish the developers would do more, is having more unique looking terrain rather than just inserting ranked blocks everywhere. But anyway, I digress. It's not a whole lot to talk about there. Yeah, it kind of just does a similar thing. If you are a defender, you can basically use this to force people to actually like take you on from here, or it forces people to take you on in this open area, which is also very predictable because now no matter what, they don't have too much room to back up to, because if they start backing up here, they fall here. But if you are using this, if you're using cover from this way, right, you can basically, if someone decides to attack you and you have to back up, again, note that you have to back up here. So it gives more of an advantage to defenders than it does attackers. Obviously, unless a defender is like, unless like you are an attacker and you have managed to get to here. However, you can just kind of be punished anyway by just someone that's up there that just sees you here and is like, I'm gonna shoot you now, and then you die. Anyway, now we get to talk about these areas. So this is an area that you can drop from over here, or you can take this area to drop into. Obviously, kind of is like a small side area, gives you a decent amount of room. Pretty much most of it is paintable, at least on this side. Note that this side is not paintable, so you can't just kind of back up into here and then expect to be able to climb up to here. You have to go around if you want to climb up. However, the interesting thing to note about this, right, is that you can actually use this as a way of baiting people, right? Say you've placed a mine here, right? Someone now, if they want to get you, they have to either like do this awkward thing where they have to do this, which kind of puts them in a pretty vulnerable state, or they have to drop down, in which case they could land on your mine in here. And with how small it is, like a mine basically covers the entire area if it explodes. No, you would not escape a mine unless you're over here and you manage to get to the very edge. And another thing to note is that this also not only provides you with peeking opportunities over here by taking this kind of area, kind of providing attackers, right? If you're an attacker and you have most of your people, you have most of your teammates that have taken this area, you can have someone technically drop onto here and provide peeking over there. However, this also provides another interesting thing for defenders, which I'll talk about in a bit. However, your ways of getting up back up again, you can climb the wall and you can basically get up again, or this is another thing that you can do. You can also climb up to here and have high ground advantage. However, note, you can't get this high ground advantage from this side. You have to basically go over here. It's not too bad, because again, you can just kind of do this. You don't need to like drop all the way down here. It's not the end of the world. But it should be noted that it kind of gives you decent high ground and is honestly accessible fairly easily. Again, like if you have people here, you have a safe enough drop to get onto here, and then you can basically take this high ground and now you have advantage over here, or you have advantage over a fight that's taking place here. Additionally, again, this kind of gives you an off angle. You can take you don't have to climb a wall, in fact. You can kind of just safely take some small jumps, which is quicker than the wall, and also a lot less, slightly safer. To basically just get an off angle from here if there's an opponent here and you drop down onto there. However, from this side, again, if you decide to drop onto here and there's like a fight going on, you basically, if you decide that there's a fight going on and you want to get advantage, you can just drop here and decide, you know what, I have high ground now. You lose. Additionally, this also kind of provides you with better off angles, because it essentially gives you access to this very hard to reach part of this area from defending. And basically just you just take your drop here, and then you basically like go up the ramp, and then you basically have this. However, additionally, note that it is a ramp, so you can kind of safely, like, if you need to take a breather and force people to take you on in a fight, you can just kind of force them to go here, you know? You can just kind of force people to drop onto here, or at least push up more slightly. Well, you have essentially a decent amount of room to take cover and take fights with, while also still having high ground advantage. This is something, again, I kind of need to start working on, is like noting that this small thing right here gives you some good high ground. And maybe I'll take this advice into games and kind of show off some stuff. And anyway, aside from that, the only other thing that I can note is this grate here, which kind of just gives you advantage over here if you're trying to take anything. So if you have a sniper here that you want to deal with, and you're a short range weapon, you can kind of deal with them right here after taking the grate. It is very punishable, and they might get you before you are able to get to them, but there's always that chance. And aside from that, this area as an attacker is pretty hard, because your only real way of actually getting up is by going through here, which you're on equal level as defender, as an attacker, and you're having now to attack like these areas, which I mentioned before, pretty decent for defenders as a whole, but they have to forcibly put themselves at risk if they want to actually peek. And this area, again, note, this is, I would argue, is probably one of the strongest areas to take as an attacker. It takes a long time to get to here, or we'll see another thing that rank modes do with this. However, it should be noted that your options for dropping are very limited. Unlike an attacker, or unlike a defender, you don't have the ability to kind of drop onto here. Instead, you have to either drop back down onto here or drop back onto this court area if you've managed to put yourself in a bad location through this. Anyway, other than that, the only thing that I can note, right, is let's say, you know, you have attackers that have kind of taken this area and all of this stuff, and like defenders are just doing all of this, right? It is risky. It is very risky, but as a defender, you do have some way of circumventing having to deal with this if you are willing to take a risk. Upon dropping from this area, you can essentially use this area as a way of getting around, and with how long it is, any short-range weapon that would want to be here has to essentially take a very punishable drop in order to actually attack you. Which does two things. Firstly, it takes them off of this area, now having to take an extremely long path just to get back, because they have to go up all the way on the grate. Then they have to go around here, and now they're back, after just doing that whole drop. But also, it gives you a way of circumventing dealing with this, which allows you an opportunity to get up onto this side while also having high ground advantage over, attackers that have just decided to set up camp right here. Other than that, I have talked about pretty much most of the main points I wanted to discuss with this map, at least on Turf War and Splat Zones. Could probably talk about some small things. Inkjet applications on this map. As far as I know, you just kind of like take this. Some of this like small terrain right here is pretty good because it means that like as an inkjet, you don't have to. You can use this small pieces of terrain as stepping stones to get up on the high ground or higher ground, I guess. With some of the most important vantage spots for inkjet, basically requiring a boost in order to actually get up. These are very interesting. Zipcaster has a unique application where it can get up onto here. It's pretty helpful for sloshers if you just want a way of getting up onto here and taking down maybe someone that is like set up onto here. Other than that though, there is actually one other thing that I do want to show off, and that is some applications for splashdown. This is something... Oh, multiplayer maps and modes have updated. Alright. This part might get cut out. I don't know. I might leave it in because it's funny, but I might cut it out. In applications for splashdown, I would like to talk about this because splashdown is something that I have started to think about more applications for as a whole. Anyway, let's take a look at splat zones first in order to talk about these applications, and then we'll quickly go through the other ranked modes because there's not a whole lot to talk about with the ranked modes. Generally, this map remains the same for the most part on most of the ranked modes. So anything I kind of said during the Turf War section applies to the ranked modes. Yeah, this is just the exact same. It should be noted though, you are forced to drop if you want to actually like take the entirety of the zone. Either that, or you can take the entirety of the zone from the top here, but you are very vulnerable while doing so, which is interesting. But again, so I've talked about Zipcaster, talked about some stuff. There are other applications for specials I know of. Notably, you can set up a big bubbler here and basically have this area be protected, although the top of the bubble will be very vulnerable. Generally, this bridge is high enough to where a big bubbler won't be too bad, although it is very vulnerable again, because if you set it up slightly beyond this, you can just shoot it. And the bubble also won't be too small, I don't think. I don't remember though. It's been a bit since I've used big bubbler. Additionally, another thing you can do if you want to force your way in, you have vac as an option for that. Missiles can force people to flee basically anywhere, and with how little backup options you have, you can essentially force someone out of an area like through the use of whale or through the use of missiles. You've got a lot of options. However, splashdown is something that I personally really enjoy, especially talking about the applications of splashdown, because splashdown's a special that I think has a numerous amount of applications actually, especially with the fists. So firstly, let's talk about the most obvious one. You can do this. So you can safely maintain this top area while having the splashdown be below, and it can paint quite a bit while also providing you good opportunities. It paints, it not only paints, but it also just provides you with a decent chip. And this can be done on numerous places. So if you have a weapon that has splashdown, there are so many places that you can do this. You can just do this on here. There are so many different high ground opportunities that you essentially have free range. Obviously, the high ground's also good for other things. Any weapon with Zuka, crab, there's a lot of good crab spots on this map. Essentially, any weapon that has crab and is short range can basically use this snipe at any point in time if they have crab. However, there is one other notable thing about splashdown, and this notably applies on pretty much any stage, but I thought I would talk about it here because it starts getting into more of a what can your weapon do on this stage, because I can't talk about every weapon. I'm just going to be mentioning the weapon. I'm just going to be mentioning specials notably. However, I would like to try and get this first try, so let's do this. If you perform, I think it's either if you perform a squid roll or you just like do this at a certain point in time, you can, there we go, yeah, you can get the splashdown to go on top of here. So, for context, normally if you decide to use a splashdown up against the platform, right? Normally if you try and use a splashdown up against a platform, what normally happens is this happens. Everything kind of forms in one area. So you'll get the paint, but you won't necessarily get the extreme damage. However, there are a lot of platforms on a lot of stages that allow you to just get them up if you just take a jump and you do it slightly before you reach the wall. Which can provide you with very good chip opportunities and other stuff for any weapon that has splashdown. Again, any kind of like high ground advantage, if your weapon, basically, I would say, if you are a long range weapon, high ground is good, very good. Any open room that provides you with good room to look around the place is amazing. And then shorter range weapons, I think I talked about most of the applications of everything throughout the stage. Anyway, that's nearly it. However, we still have 2 ranked modes to get through. Oh boy. Okay, Scorch Tower. Let's talk about Scorch Tower control. This one is interesting. Now, obviously, again, most of what I have talked about already kind of applies. There are some notable differences, though. Some very notable differences. So this area essentially remains the same. Again, good opportunity to look over the tower and everything. However, this area has been shortened, and this platform no longer extends out too much. What this creates, right, is it creates this interesting thing where you, as a long-range weapon, you'll still have good advantage over here, but as a short-range weapon, you no longer have that, while having this great, essentially still remain here, being the same, very similar easily punishable, but very good vantage point. Notably, the cover is gone from here, meaning that if you are down here, you no longer have too much cover that you can use to work with, aside from this pole, and maybe the tower. Again, kind of have this uninkable underneath, so that way it's very hard for someone to shark here easily. However, another notable thing, this gets shortened. So this gets shortened with the entirety, with this part getting essentially raised up slightly. You have cover here, which is mostly going to be used by attackers to essentially force defenders to get out from here. And your only real ways of getting up is that you have this immediate option that can take a wall. You have some walls that you can climb here to get up onto here. However, your only real main option, right, is by using this little piece of terrain to get up onto here. Which is pretty interesting, because what it essentially does is it kind of creates this whole risk and reward thing where you can either immediately get up onto here while taking this. You have a it's decently safe option through here. However, you have to climb a wall up in order to get it, or in order to get to it. It's mostly safe in the sense that if the attacking team is back here, obviously if the attacking team is right up here, then this probably won't be safe. However, you do have the room to back up, unlike an attacker who is going to run out of room very quickly. Notably, this drop remains. And another thing is that this cover kind of gets simplified, essentially giving the same thing. Snipers can only really attack from here and this other stuff. However, there are just a couple other notable things. This area gets extended outward, so you basically can use this for fights as the tower kind of approaches another checkpoint. We have this bumper that you can basically use as cover. This drop remains, again, as always. This terrain usually doesn't ever change for the most part. However, they add in a ramp on this mode. This ramp essentially just allows you to get back up onto here pretty quickly, which is very good for tower. It really does, for tower at least. What this kind of creates is this thing where mid becomes a lot more accessible, because now you have a bit more of a safer option to back up from mid. But this also just kind of opens up mid a bit more, as now your option is this paintable surface rather than just the ring. Notably, the tower gets reduced in size. These still provide the same cover that they used to. However, the middle tower mostly exists. You can get high ground advantage over it. However, with how open the stage is, you don't get extreme high ground advantage over the terrain. And then obviously the tower. There are a couple of interesting things that you can do with the tower in this one. You have this tower jump, which is fairly risky if you want to use this to get up on here. Notably, though, this does give you this area immediately as an attacker, which is, again, fairly interesting that they lock this. They lock an immediate option behind a tower jump, which is very, very interesting to me. Notably, though, as a defender, right, you can also use this if the tower is like going back. So you can ride the tower slightly to get up onto here faster, which does give you that off angle again. There really aren't too many other. There's one other tower jump that you can take, and it's only really onto that sniping platform, which again, as usual, provides snipers a solid vantage point over the entire stage. Basically, especially with how much more open this becomes a bit more important now, as you can essentially get advantage over here alongside this small jut, which kind of gives you more room. Other than that, though, that's kind of it for tower. Tower path kind of just, it goes. I'm not here to talk about the semantics, though, of the whether or not the tower path is good or not. For Rainmaker, you have two different checkpoints. I know that. We'll kind of look at them here. So for Rainmaker, notably, This checkpoint is very far up and also gives you a way of getting back up onto here, which is very interesting. This same thing is very similar to Tower, with this bumper coming back. However, it should be noted that we are now at a hybrid of Tower control and splat zones, where this ramp now covers the entire area. However, you still have this like high ground advantage. You still have this longer route here. This block returns for cover. This ramp still exists to create mid, to allow mid to be more open. And you have these checkpoints. This checkpoint can provide you a faster way of getting back up onto here, not only as an attacker to use this, but also as a defender. And this checkpoint is very open, but also provides some cover in this area. In this area, this fairly open-ish, at least fairly open in terms of the rest of this map, kind of mid-area. However, this stage also does something interesting. It adds in these grates, which provide you a very risky, but a way, they are very risky, but they provide you a way of getting into this side of the map faster. They're very risky, which is interesting because, again, they give you this area, so the risk kind of exists to make it so that you can't just easily get over here, because if this were like, I don't know, if this were a ramp to get up on here, then this would be like the path that you would use all the time. But again, interestingly, because it has these grates, you can't easily take this as much. But it does provide you not only a second way of getting back into this area, while providing you a good vantage point for both attackers and defenders, to have this open area that forces people to kind of take you on in a fight. But it also provides you with a second Rainmaker path, which I can just... Never mind, I lied. I forgot. Splashdown does not work like that. Provides you just with a second way of doing, taking the checkpoint. And notably, this is extremely fast in comparison to this route. However, this route is very risky, but fast, where this route is longer, but safe. And again, just to demonstrate, you can jump on here once the checkpoint gets broken, and you can still jump back onto your spawn. Once the pedestal goes back up, which I think it basically allows this area to become a lot more, because you're going to be pushed up back farther. They kind of allow you to get back up into here faster, which is again another interesting thing. And then lastly, I have been going for a long time, but we are almost done. Scorch Gorge on Clamblitz. I don't know if I'm gonna do, I don't know how much. This is a lot of footage. It's fine though. I jest. It's fine. Scorch Gorge on Clamblitz. Again, kind of the right side remaining the same thing as ever, as I explained earlier. However, this returns to the splat zones, and it returns to a hybrid of Rainmaker, Tower Control, and splat zones. So this essentially is the same as splat zones, and this is the cover here is no longer here. Instead, it's replaced by the basket that exists, which is interesting. This platform is kind of back, allowing you some good high ground advantage. Again, this is here, and this is very similar to Rainmaker, again, providing you a decently open space to fight while also having some slight cover in here, so that way you can like dodge and dip and duck behind cover and everything. However, the mid is the splat zones mid, alongside this existing, and also a bunch of cover being taken out here, which kind of allows attackers to hit this a bit more. This cover kind of does, again, very similar thing. However, where if you're an attacker and using it from this side, you're very vulnerable from up here, but if you're a defender and using it from this side, you're very safe, because the only way that people are going to get you is by actually poking out. However, this stage has a hybrid bridge. So you have, again, the bridge that you can use as an alternative route. Again, notably, very, very risky bridge usage here. But it gives you this area, which again, as I mentioned before, farthest away from everything. So what essentially creates is a pretty good sharking spot. However, it gives you multiple ways. Firstly, you have the ramp here. That means that mid is essentially as open as it could be. But you also have this grate, allowing you a secondary option to get to everywhere. There is one notable thing that I can say. Right, so upon dunking the clams in the basket, you can kind of, if you are willing to take a slight risk to get up onto here, you can use this to throw clams in while having an advantage with high ground. Which, again, kind of interesting. But if you have splashdown weapon, then look out! Yeah. Anyway. That's where I think I'll leave it. I will probably edit everything together. I think depending on what I decide later. So I'm gonna edit this all together. I'm gonna post it online, just to kind of get my thoughts out there on kind of the stages and looking at them. Not necessarily from is this stage good? Is this stage bad? What does this do? More so just kind of talking about objectively, what does this do? What can it do for you? What should you be doing? What does this do? Not even like what you should be doing. More so just, what does this do? What can you do with this? Just kind of talking about like how everything in the stage can be used. Depending on if this video ends up being like an hour and 45 minutes, then note that I probably took this into games to apply this stuff. But other than that, this is kind of where I will leave off. I think this ending bit will probably get cut and put at the end. I don't know. So in the meantime, I'm going to record this. So anyway, guys, that is Scorch Gorge from an objective analysis. So now let's take that into a game. Just so that way we can talk a little bit more about the stage. Maybe talk more about how you would actually apply some of the weapons. But also, more importantly, actually show off what I have been talking about so I don't look stupid. So if I do look stupid and I change my opinion on stuff, then the game was probably why. But anyway, yeah, let's take it into a game. No, you're only gonna ever hear that if I decide to actually take it into a game. I don't know if I will, but I might. In which case, you'll get more content from me. No one you've heard about, except maybe like 2 people. Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm going to leave off. This has been Supera Jokera talking about Splatoon stages. Or so just from what the stage does. Not like any objective thing. I have map opinions, but I'm not going to really share those map opinions. I might create a whole other thing for map opinions, but I don't know. Anyway, hope you'll have a good day. I probably will do this for all of them. I don't know. I will see how I feel about it, because this is a long. I have been going for a long time, so I shall see. Have a good day, I guess. If I make another one, you will know.